All right, let's just strip away the digital screens and modern comforts for a minute. In this explainer, we are jumping straight into a historical survival nightmare. We're looking at employment in hell, the gruesome life of a plague doctor. It's a very real, very dark chapter of human history, and we're going to see what it actually took to wake up, go to work, and just try to survive one of the absolute worst biological crises humanity has ever faced.
So what is the last thing you see before you die? Well, let's set the scene. Imagine waking up not to an alarm clock on your nightstand, but to the rhythmic, heavy galloping of a horse-drawn coroner's buggy rolling right over the cobblestones outside your window. Every single morning, without fail, they come to collect the bodies of the people who didn't make it through the night. You take a breath and instantly your lungs fill with this thick, inescapable smell from the massive, ever-growing burn piles right down the street. That's your morning reality before you've even gotten out of bed.
You skip breakfast. Why? Because honestly, there's zero time to spare. Your city is in an unprecedented meltdown, and the government desperately needs your skills. You walk to the closet, pull open the doors, and come face to face with your professional alter ego. Today, just like every other grueling day in this seemingly endless nightmare, you are the plague doctor. And getting dressed is a whole ordeal. It's this complex, claustrophobic suit of survival. Step 1. You're tucking your undergarments incredibly tight into your socks, shirts into pants, pants into socks, because you can't risk any contaminated air touching your bare skin. Step 2. You throw on this thick, ankle-length overcoat. And to make it impenetrable for step 3, that leather is actually sealed with literal animal fat and scented wax. Then you completely seal your boots and your gloves. Finally, step 4, the iconic piece. You strap on that haunting herb-stuffed beak mask. Now, you gotta remember, we are operating strictly under miasma theory here. This was the prevailing medical belief, way before germ theory was even a thought, that diseases were spread by noxious gases or bad air. So every morning, you're physically stuffing that beak with a fresh mix of lavender, herbs, and spices. To you and your patients, this is a totally legitimate filtration system to counteract those horrific smells and keep the plague out of your lungs. Next, you grab your heavy leather hat and your absolutely essential tool, the wooden cane. You're heading straight into the poverty-stricken neighborhoods. See, the government hired you specifically to provide services to low-income folks who can't afford proper care, and these devastated wards are where the disease is running completely wild. Before you even get to your first door, you're swarmed by frantic, sickly people begging for help. So your cane serves its first major purpose right here, literally beating back the highly infectious public just to maintain a physical safe distance. Once you finally step inside a house, man, the scene is just grim. The symptoms you're looking for: extreme burning fever, a throat-scratching cough, and a total rejection of food and liquid. Sometimes dehydration takes them before the plague even does. But the ultimate, definitive mark of death? Buboes. These are swollen, blood and pus-filled lymph nodes that turn into huge boils on the neck, arms, and legs. And this disease moves so fast, a person can feel totally fine at bedtime and just never wake up. Once those buboes appear, the clock is rapidly ticking. Which brings us to the horrific duality of your cane. We know purpose 1 is beating away the desperate crowds outside, but purpose 2 happens right here in the bedroom. You actually use the stick to gently prod the patient's motionless body from afar just to see if they're even still breathing. You absolutely cannot risk getting close until you know for certain if there are signs of life. If they are alive, your medical treatments are frankly terrifyingly limited and basically anecdotal. First, you try to drain those oozing buboes using jars of live leeches, placing them directly onto the skin. Then, you might hand the dying person a fresh bouquet of flowers, so they can at least smell some good air in their final agonizing moments. After about 30 minutes, you know they aren't going to make it to sunrise, so you perform the only truly useful service you can. You record their last will and testament, take your fee, and step right back out into those cold, rat-infested streets. You are working in a constant state of low-level terror, but what really messes with your head is the realization of what you represent. For so many of these dying citizens, your terrifying, imposing, bird-like mask is literally the last thing they will ever see. You aren't just a doctor to them, you are a bad omen. You are the physical embodiment of their approaching death. As you make your rounds, you think about the government's extreme attempts to stop the spread. They're doing things like burning earthly belongings and isolating the sick on remote islands. It's a fascinating look at the early evolution of public health, especially the concept of quarantino. It's an Italian word meaning 40 days, which is the exact amount of time sailors are forced to stay on docked boats to ensure they aren't carrying any bad air into port. But the crazy irony here, everyone is completely oblivious to the fact that the infected fleas living on the rats swarming the streets are the true biological culprits. Now, you'd think treating the sick is the worst part of the job, right? Actually, no. The ultimate risk is the autopsy. You are officially tasked by the city to open up deceased bodies to meticulously document the internal effects of the disease. And this is, without a doubt, your most dangerous duty. Because the mortality rate is a staggering 80%. Let that number sink in. 80%. During an autopsy, one single slip of the scalpel or one tiny accidental splash of infected bodily fluid on your bare skin, and it is a death sentence. If you contract the plague, there is an 80% chance you'll be dead within 3 to 8 agonizing days. Every single time you go to work, you are walking a tightrope over an abyss. So how does this eventually end? Let's look at the timeline. Year 1, you're doing your daily rounds in the poverty-stricken wards, watching the numbers climb. By year 3, the extreme death toll peaks across the city, completely wiping out entire family lineages. But finally, by year 5, something shifts. The tragic reality is that the disease killed so many people so incredibly fast that it literally struggles to find new hosts to infect. And slowly, it just burns itself out. With the crisis finally receding and the streets quietly emptying of the coroner's carts, the government relieves you of your harrowing duties. And honestly, you're overwhelmingly happy to leave this bureaucratic underworld behind. There was a saying at the time, "I'd rather be retired in heaven than employed in hell," and you lived that hell. So you make the long, emotional journey back to the countryside. You are finally returning to a family you haven't touched in years because you couldn't risk spreading the plague. When you walk through the door, your wife completely breaks down in tears at the sight of you, and your kids barely even recognize their own father. But that night, your wife prepares a beautiful feast in the countryside. You all sit down together, and it is, without a doubt, the best meal of your entire life. You finally feel safe. The evening winds down into a quiet, peaceful bedtime. All the tension you've been carrying for years just melts away as you gently tuck your children into bed for the first time in what feels like forever. Before heading to sleep yourself, you step outside into the cool night air, walking over to the vegetable garden to relieve yourself one last time. But as you look down in the dark, your hand brushes against something abnormal. You feel a small lump on your inner groin, a bubo. In a sudden, paralyzing rush of absolute horror, you realize that the invisible biological threat didn't stay in the city. It somehow followed you home. The timer is ticking. What do you do now? As we wrap up this explainer, we leave you right here, staring at the ultimate game-over screen of historical survival. You survived the devastating wards, you survived the highly infectious autopsies, and you survived the rat-infested streets, only to find the nightmare has crept right into your own backyard. So what exactly is your next move? Do you walk back inside your blissfully unaware family, or do you isolate yourself in the dark and face the end entirely alone?